To understand Hassan, the main character in Lupin, is to understand his backstory. His father emigrated to France from Senegal and got a job as a chauffeur for a very rich, well-to-do French family. And while the woman of the house, Madame Anne, treated them pretty well as the daughter of the house, Juliette, I mean, she was a teenager and she was kind of slutty, coming on to a very young Hassan, but he wasn't hating on it. Anyway, I'll get back on track. The man of the house, Hubert Pellegrini, was an asshole. And when one day this very expensive Marie Antoinette necklace went missing, of course, who are you going to blame? The Senegalese immigrant. Even though Hassan's dad swore up and down that he had nothing to do with it. And the reason that Hubert really thinks he did it was because Hubert caught him in that very room the day prior. But Hassan's dad wasn't stealing a necklace, he was dusting the bookshelf. And another person that was in the room that day was Madame Anne. And when Hassan's dad says, ask your wife, Hubert says, keep my wife out of it, and sends him off to jail. Madame Anne never says a word, and the necklace was never found. The first chance that Hassan gets to go visit his father in jail, he does so, but his father doesn't show up. And that's because his father had committed suicide. Or at least, that's the story that they're claiming. You get the idea that he might have been coerced into killing himself by other inmates. And when Hassan was burying his father, Madame Anne showed up, asking if she could do anything, but at that point, it's too late. And Hassan just walks by her and says, go fuck yourself. When Hassan went back to his house, he found a gift that his father had gotten him for his birthday. And it actually was a book from that bookshelf that Madame Anne told his dad that he could take home for him. The book is called Arsène Lupin, the Gentleman Thief. And Hassan read this book up and down, knowing every word, and really emulating Lupin. Lupin's whole thing is the fact that nobody knows who he is. And the fact that nobody knew who he was his biggest advantage. But he was also one step ahead of everybody. He was a lone wolf, but he did have a certain sect of people that he truly trusted. Now, present-day Hassan has just gotten a new job at the Louvre as a janitor. He goes to meet with his ex, who also happens to be the mother of his child, to tell her the good news about his new job, although she doesn't think it's going to last very long. It's worth mentioning, though, it does seem like the two have a really good relationship, though. He asks about seeing his son, and they set up a date for the weekend. He then heads to go visit some low-life gangsters who he borrowed money from. The issue is he doesn't have the money. And that does not sit well with the one guy, Vincent, who's the guy we borrowed the money from. He has his goon, named Kevin, dangle Hassan over a balcony, but Hassan says, wait, I have a plan to get us more money than we ever know what to do with. Hassan has devised this plan centered around the Marie Antoinette necklace that is going to be going up for auction from the museum. And his plan is to steal it. He tells them that he can get them to the necklace because he works at the Louvre, he knows the museum inside and out, and no one pays attention to the maintenance men. So the plan is for Kevin, Vincent, and their driver Rudy to sneak in as janitors while taking out some of the security guards and switching out those uniforms. Hassan is going to get them in with some swipe cards, and he tells them to put chloroform in some of the cleaning bottles so they can knock these people out. They then have to disarm the security footage, and when they do that, they have about 7 minutes till the police show up. Hassan, meanwhile, he'll be bidding on the necklace. And after he, quote, wins the auction, he knows that they send the necklace down to the foyer to be inspected and whatnot. That's where the group will grab the necklace, and at this point, Rudy is outside waiting in the getaway car, and they get out of there. And that plan is too good of a plan for Vincent to pass up. So it comes the day of the auction, and Hassan shows up in a really good-looking suit, and the auctioneer starts explaining the history of the necklace. How, when the necklace went missing, it wasn't sold as one piece, it was broken up. And Hubert Pellegrini spent his life trying to get back those diamonds and recreate the necklace until he was finally able to do so. And that is what is going up for auction. One person that is there to watch the auction go down is Juliette Pellegrini, and Hassan didn't really think that she was going to be there, but he's sitting far away from her, thinking that she probably won't notice him. The auction starts, people start bidding, and then Hassan gets involved, although no one recognizes him. But Hassan had planned on this, so he set up a fake Wikipedia page where he had 500+ million euros listed as his net worth. So he checks out as far as they're concerned. During the bidding, though, he gets word from Rudy that the security camera footage is disabled, and now they have 7 minutes. So he upbids everybody by an extra $20 million and wins the auction. Everything so far is going according to plan. But little does Hassan know that Kevin and Vincent are planning on double-crossing him. I mean, I'm sure Rudy was too, but Rudy had left to go in the getaway car. So Hassan, along with the auctioneer, head downstairs to the foyer to examine the necklace. The auctioneer is a little hesitant to do so because he hasn't gotten the money yet, but Hassan makes the claim that, hey, I just bid $60 million for this thing. I clearly check out. This thing's my new baby. let me just take a look at it. And Hassan is able to get his hands on the necklace. But when he does, that's when Kevin and Vincent attack, taking out everybody in the room, including Hassan, and stealing the necklace for themselves. They flee the Louvre, get in the getaway car, but it's a little too much car for Rudy, and they end up crashing and going into the Louvre, getting caught in the process. When the police show up, the police captain wants to interview everybody, including Hassan, which the auctioneer thinks is ridiculous because he was attacked too. But Hassan plays it beautifully, saying, no, that's okay. The police are just trying to do their job. The captain, though, has never heard of Hassan and wants to know how he got his money. And he says, well, if you checked your cell phone today, you've made me money. The captain, though, does get a phone call that they caught the perpetrators and they've gotten the necklace back. They're sending it to the lab for testing to make sure it's legit. And he lets Hassan go. But as Hassan's walking away, the captain thinks better of it and decides to pat him down, although all he finds is a pen from the Louvre. He then, for the second time, allows Hassan to leave, but Hassan doesn't leave, going to a restricted area and changing into his maintenance man outfit. Because this whole plan was set up 2 weeks ago. Hassan knew that Kevin and Vincent were going to double-cross him, and he had a friend of his make him a fake imitation necklace. So when Kevin attacked, Hassan dumped the real necklace in a trash can and threw the fake necklace on the ground, and they had no idea. And since no one pays attention to the maintenance men, that night as he's leaving this shift, he takes the trash bag, fills it full of dirty diapers, the cops really don't check it, and he's able to get the necklace out of there. Now, this plan might have been for money, might have been for revenge for his dad. Either way, though, the plan played out beautifully. The necklace, getting a job at the Louvre. This was right out of Lupin's playbook. The next day, he goes and picks up Raoul just like he planned with his ex, and he actually gives him the Lupin book, the same book that his father had grabbed from the Pellegrini library. But there's only one slight problem. Hassan is not the only one who's familiar with Lupin, because a police officer by the name of Youssef is very aware of Lupin. He, in fact, thinks that this story sounds way too familiar to Lupin. And when the police get word that the necklace that they have is fake, he starts to get very suspicious. And he is on to Hassan, or should I say, he is on to the fake name that Hassan used in the auction, Paul Cernine. In episode 2, we'll start out with the aftermath of what happened to Hassan after his father, quote, committed suicide. He gets a knock at the door from an officer named Inspector Dumal. And after Hassan opens the door, Inspector Dumal is a dick. He starts to try to bully a 16-year-old kid. He tells Hassan to pack his things up because he's taking him to social services. But as Hassan starts packing up, he decides, yeah, I'm not really interested in doing that, and tries to sneak out the window into a neighbor's house and down a flight of stairs. The only problem is Officer Dumal is onto him and jacks him up. He takes Hassan to the group home, where the head of this group home gets him all set up. He's even nice enough to give him a Bible. A little after that, the head of this youth home ends up seeing him reading the Bible and is pleased. In reality, though, he's not really reading the Bible. He's got a Lupin book hidden inside. But there's a reason he headed over there. It's because they found a suicide note in his father's belongings in prison that was for Hassan. And it's his father admitting to everything that he was accused of. The man, though, has come bearing good news. An anonymous donor has come forward donating the tuition fee for one of the most prestigious schools in France for Hassan to go to. He tells him, it's too good of an opportunity for you to pass up. You have to go. You have to try to make something of your life. And on one of his first days at this new prestigious school, a couple of rich kids try to just give him a hard time, but one of the other students tells the bullies to kick rocks. He introduces himself as a guy named Benjamin Farrow. And Benjamin is the antiques dealer that helps Hassan out. He's the guy who made the necklace. He's his, go-to friend. And present-day Hassan is kind of having an issue with Ben. Ben has examined the necklace and tells him it was never broken apart. And that really upsets Hassan, because if the necklace was never taken apart, then the story about the gems being scattered around the world is complete bullshit. His father was innocent, and the necklace never left the Pellegrini safe. Ben tries to tell him, man, you made it out. I mean, does that really even matter? But it does matter to Hassan. For 25 years, he lived with the fact that he thought his father was a thief, when in reality, he doesn't think he was. So Hassan knows he needs to get some answers, and he knows just the person to contact, Juliet. Juliet goes to visit her mother because her mother and father have since divorced. And her mother isn't exactly broken up about the fact that the necklace once again went missing. She tells her mom, though, no one's worried, the police have a lead, but Madame Anne's point is Hubert owns most of the newspapers, so she can't trust them. Anne starts kind of insulting Hubert to Juliet, and she says, could you stop? He doesn't hate you. But Anne says, that's just because I know where all the bodies are buried. She also knows that Hubert took it really hard when the necklace went missing 25 years ago, which means he's probably going to take it even harder that it happened a second time. When Juliet leaves this meeting with her mom, the man at the front desk gives her a note that gives her a time and a place to meet with the direction of no police. Of course, the note was left by Hassan. and it's a very public place in a park. But before Hassan meets her there, he starts calling in a bunch of food orders with a bicycle delivery service that he happens to be dressed like one of their drivers. After placing these calls, he bikes over to Juliet and tells her, "I don't want money, I want answers." And that's when he reveals himself as Hassan. He's also noticed, though, that she did, in fact, bring police. She's bugged. And he covers that, which the microphone was hidden in a brooch on her jacket. And the police captain is freaking out a little bit because of the fact that they can't hear this conversation go down. The first question Hassan asks is, "Why did you lie about the necklace being taken apart?" And Juliet tells him that it was a story that her and Hubert concocted to try to drum up more money when they eventually sold it. Her father ended up finding it from a jeweler in South Africa 5 years ago completely intact. She warns him that if Hubert finds out that Hassan is behind this, he's dead. She begs him to just give back the necklace, and she promises she won't tell the cops that she actually knows him. The last question he has is, "Please, tell me my father was innocent," but she says, "No, I'm afraid he wasn't. He signed a confession. I'm afraid that you don't know your father like you thought you did." Hassan, though, knows that the police are closing in, and he takes off, biking through the park as a bunch of police officers chase on foot. But luckily for him, he anticipated this, and all of those bicycle delivery men end up showing up at once, confusing all of the police, and they don't catch Hassan. It leaves the captain infuriated that he got away, and Hassan just dumps the outfit and walks out of there like it never happened. He heads back to where he keeps all of his outfits, and he's kept that suicide letter from his father. And he's noticed something. His father misspelled a couple of words, and his father never misspelled words. He thinks it's a clue. The two words that are misspelled are comet and libraries. And upon doing a little research, Hassan had found that there was an inmate that was in prison with his father named Comet, and he worked in a library. He takes it to Ben because he's convinced that this is a sign, but Ben doesn't think it's anything. He thinks it's just misspelled words. Benjamin tells him if you want to answer so bad, then go visit this guy because he's still in prison. The issue is he's too sick to leave his cell, which means that Hassan is going to have to get into that prison. He sets up a meeting with another inmate who doesn't look anything like him other than the fact that they're both black, and he tells him that, and Hassan proposes that the two switch places. And he's worked this out perfectly because the guards, well, they just switch shifts, so they're not going to notice that the prisoner they're taking back isn't the one they brought there. As far as this prisoner, well, he's only been there for a week, so the rest of the inmates won't really realize it either, and he's getting transferred to another cell. Works out beautifully. There is only one issue. The prisoner, Traore, well, he's handcuffed. And Hassan acts like he never thought of that, putting his hands over his, using his lockpicking skills, taking the handcuffs off, and putting them on himself. Right before he leaves, though, he tells him, "I know what you're in for, and if I catch you selling so much as a joint, I'm going to find you." He then yells guards, and the switch is complete. Now that he's inside, though, he has to find Comet. And he starts asking around and is able to get the cell number, but he's attracted some unwanted attention. Two of the prison drug dealers are eyeing him up. Hassan was able to get a job in the prison pretty quickly delivering sheets, but when he goes to Comet's cell, he finds out that he's once again in the infirmary, and his cellie tells him, "I don't think he's coming back." This is yet another hurdle that Hassan has to get over because now he has to find his way into the infirmary to talk to Comet. But as he's walking away from Comet's cell, that's when the two drug dealers show up, demanding to know who he is, and he gives them a fake name. They tell Hassan that the man whose identity he stole owes him 1,000 euros worth of drugs, and he has 3 days to get it to him. They really don't care that Hassan isn't this guy. Hassan agrees, figuring that he'll be out of there within 3 days. He then goes to the guard and complains that he's already sick to get himself in the infirmary. And he tries to sweet talk the doctor to get a night's stay in there, but she just figures that he's scared being in prison, not agreeing to admit him for the night. So he needs a legitimate excuse in, and he walks up to the two drug dealers and tells them that they can stick the money up their ass. And that's when they shank him. So Hassan has his way into the infirmary. And that night, he is finally able to talk to Comet. He tells him who he is and who his father was, explaining that the two were in prison together at the same time. And Comet recognizes who his father was, but Comet tells him that his father was alone in his cell under surveillance when he killed himself. He explains that he only met his father once when he brought him a book. He does tell him, though, that when he returned the book, he did instruct him to keep it, just in case anybody ever came looking for it. And he still has the book, it's just in his cell. So the next day, when Hassan is doing his rounds with the sheets, he once again heads back to that cell and looks around, and sure enough, there's an old Lupin book. When Hassan gets back to his prison cell, he starts combing over this book looking for more clues, and he finally finds it. His father had stained certain words. And when you put the words together, it reads out, "I am innocent. I was trapped by Anne Pellegrini." He then hides the book, though, because they're handing out food. Although the guard spits in his and says that drug dealer who shanked him will be around later that night to, quote, tuck him in. They then have to go out for a rec in the yard, and Hassan leaps up to try to dunk a basketball, but ends up tearing open his stitches, so he has to head back to the infirmary to get re-patched up. He asks the doctor if he can say hi to Comet, and she agrees. He tells him that he found the book, and Comet asks for a favor, to make his wife smile. He agrees, and then he says his goodbyes to the doctor, and it's not a goodbye, I'll see you later, it's a goodbye, goodbye. Now it's time for Hassan to plan his escape. Now, while Hassan was getting himself put in prison on purpose, Juliet is also trying to find some answers. She heads to her father's place, where she asks him if it was really Hassan's father who stole the necklace 25 years ago. And he freaks out at her, screaming, of course he stole the necklace from us. He apologizes, but he just feels like it was a betrayal. That kind of question coming from her because they're so close. Now, back to the prison. That night when the guards go to, quote, check on Hassan, but really let the drug dealer in and beat the shit out of him, Hassan isn't in his cell. In fact, he's hanging from the shower in an apparent suicide attempt. They rush him into the ambulance to a local hospital. But Hassan isn't dead. In fact, he didn't even try to commit suicide. This was all part of the plan to get out of the prison. He had swiped some pills from the infirmary when he tore his stitches open that slowed his heart rate down. And when he wakes up, he waits for the ambulance to stop at a red light, and he just hops out the back. The first place he heads the next morning is Anne Pellegrini's. He's able to sneak in using a key card and confronts her, and she is very surprised to see him. He demands to know what she did to his father, and she admits that she made him sign a confession. She tried to explain that it was better to be guilty and free than innocent and in prison. She did it because she thought that he was going to get a reduced sentence if he did so, but it turned out the judge was a hard ass. His father couldn't accept the fact that the confession that he was forced to do ended up being his downfall, and he committed suicide. She says aloud that she was naive because there were agreements made, but he cuts her off and says, agreements are only good for people like you. They're never good for people like my father. She tells him that after his father's death, she tried to help him. She did it from a distance and anonymously, but she did. And that's when Hassan realizes that she was the private donor who helped him go to that school. A big reason why she did that was because she wanted to earn his forgiveness, along with his dead father's. She tells Hassan that there was a police officer who swore that he'd help him, but that police officer lied. And when Hassan pressures her for a name, the name she gives up is Officer Dumont, the same Dumont who put him in that group home. Hassan asks her why would Dumont exploit the fact that he knew that his dad trusted Anne, but she doesn't have an answer for that one. He then leaves. He knows he needs to fulfill his promise to Comet. He sneaks into his wife's tiny apartment and puts a giant gem on their wedding picture. He then returns to his headquarters and starts looking up what happened to Lieutenant Dumont. And then finally, for the police, well, the captain's having a tough go of it. After the failed attempt to get any information from the exchange between Juliet and Hassan, he calls Juliet in because he's pretty convinced that Juliet knew who this mystery man was. But Juliet claims that she doesn't. And when he continues to press her on the matter, she says, okay, I'll tell you what I told him. I told him the officer in charge was a moron, and then she leaves. But Youssef hasn't given up on the Lupin connection. He realizes that a lot of the names connected to this are anagrams for Arsène Lupin. He tells another police officer named Sophia about this theory, but she thinks it's ridiculous. And that night, as everyone's packing up to go home, they start kind of making fun of him for that theory. In episode 3, you get more backstory on how Hassan met Claire. At that fancy prep school, there were a couple of guys who were up to no good. They started making trouble in Claire's neighborhood, and Hassan came to the rescue. Or so he thought. She actually got pissed off, saying, you know, girls don't need your help. We're not just fragile little beings. But then she realized she was being pretty rude, and they struck up a friendship. Now, those same guys later on continued to give the couple a hard time, and he tried to defend her honor once again, but he got his ass kicked. As she's cleaning him up, he tried to kiss her, but she pulled back because she wasn't really looking for that kind of relationship. She was just looking for a friend. Of course, as time went on, it actually did become a relationship. And while Hassan was off at that prestigious school, Inspector Dumont went to go meet with Hubert Pellegrini to find out how the investigation was going. And while Dumont seemed like an asshole because he treated Hassan like an asshole, he actually believed that Hassan's father was innocent. The first clue was the fact that he just kept denying repeatedly that he wasn't involved, but the bigger clue is the fact that he didn't fit the profile at all. And then also, he found out that Hubert Pellegrini took out an insurance policy on the necklace about a week before it went missing. Now, Hubert said it was because he talked to a friend who said the necklace was undervalued, and he was willing to give Dumont the friend's information so he can clear him. At this point, though, Dumont definitely suspects that Hubert Pellegrini had something to do with the necklace missing. But Dumont did his job. He continued to dig around, and he found nothing. In fact, Hassan's father was nowhere near the safe when the necklace went missing. Pellegrini continues to point to the fact that Hassan's father's prints were all over the safe, but Dumont tells him that the experts believe the prints were planted there. Pellegrini asked Dumont, well, then who planted them there? But Dumont doesn't say anything because it's pretty obvious who Dumont thinks planted them. Dumont does tell him, though, that he's well aware of all the influence that Pellegrini has over him, but he's planning on seeing this investigation out. And that's when Pellegrini threatens Dumont's wife, and Dumont's mood changes. Pellegrini then lays out the entire plan, getting a forced confession from Hassan's dad by using Anne to do it. Anne was nothing more than a puppet in this whole thing. She truly believed that he was getting a reduced sentence when he wasn't. And that was the day that Dumont sold out to Pellegrini. But present-day Hassan needs to get to present-day Dumont. And present-day Dumont has been promoted to police commissioner. Hassan has hooked up a bunch of cameras all over Dumont's house and is just surveilling him. And Dumont has no idea he's being watched. He waits for Dumont to go to work, where Dumont is in a meeting with the mayor. And that's when Hassan walks in a disguise as an IT guy. He tells Dumont that he needs to talk to him about his computer because while they were doing an update, they found a bunch of porn. And that's pretty embarrassing, so they go out in the hallway to discuss it. And Dumont says, yeah, do whatever you want, man. Get rid of it. But Hassan says, I'm not getting rid of it. You need to get rid of it. It's your computer. I'm not touching it. Now, Hassan almost gets his cover blown by another staffer who doesn't recognize him as the IT guy. And Dumont asks to see some identification, but Hassan makes a big scene. And just to keep Hassan quiet from the whole screaming, you've got porn on your computer, Dumont agrees to walk with him. They go down in a hallway where Hassan uses pressure points to knock Dumont out, take his cell phone, and he breaks the SIM card. Security camera footage does catch Hassan wheeling out a giant trunk to an unmarked vehicle. When Dumont wakes up, he's in a dingy room tied up with Hassan in another room. Hassan has video cameras set up and speakers, and he's talking through a voice changer so Dumont can't recognize him. He's also got a projector set up, and he starts to put pictures of his own father on there, as well as the autopsy report of his suicide and the police files. And the whole link in all this is that Dumont is all over all of these files. Dumont tells him that that's normal procedure because he was in charge of the investigation. But Hassan tells him that's ridiculous. You had one suspect. You didn't search that hard for the necklace. Why did you frame him? But Dumont sticks to the script, saying that Hassan's father was guilty because of, quote, evidence. Dumont then asks him, does this have anything to do with the robbery at the Louvre? I mean, this is the same necklace. It's 25 years later. But Hassan doesn't answer him, just shutting off the microphone. Hassan waits a little bit because he's done some digging, and he wants to incentivize Dumont to try to tell him what really happened to his father. And he's found out that Dumont took money from some pretty shady people. People that human traffic, drug dealers, because the job of commissioner didn't pay that well. And no one knew about this because he was getting paid via a secret bank account, but the funny thing about secret bank accounts these days is they're not so secret if you look for them. This really upsets Dumont, who screams that he was doing it for his children, to put them in good schools and to provide for them a better life. Hassan demands to know what actually happened to his father, but Dumont is sticking to the script that he was guilty, he hung himself, and that's it. But that's when Dumont says, you know, Babacar, who was Hassan's father, yeah, Babacar fucked up too. I mean, he was an immigrant who didn't have a euro when he came over here. I don't blame him for doing what he did, but Hassan cuts him off. Someone must have framed you to put that police report together. But Dumont says, I didn't have to. The evidence was there. Dumont then asks for some water, and since Hassan isn't a savage, he brings him a bottle. And as he's waiting for his next step, Hassan gets a phone call from Claire, because Claire is wondering what they're planning on getting Raoul for his birthday. And Hassan has completely forgotten about this, and he tries to play it off like he hasn't, but Claire can see right through it. She asks what's keeping him so busy, but then realizes maybe she doesn't want the answer, and Hassan says, yeah, you don't want the answer. She does tell him, you know, just because we're not sleeping together doesn't mean you can't talk to me, and while he appreciates that, he's not willing to tell her what he's up to. After hanging up with Claire, Hassan goes to plan number 2 to try to get Dumont to talk. And that's using video that he got from Dumont's house and putting a deep fake on it. A very convincing deep fake where Dumont is talking about liking children. I mean, videos that if they ever saw the light of day, it would ruin Dumont's life. Dumont yells at him, I told you the truth and you just don't like it. And Hassan, who at this point is very angry and very animated, yells, tell me why you framed my dad. And at that moment, Hassan knows that he really messed up. Because Dumont remembers Hassan and now knows who is behind all of this. Dumont pleads for forgiveness from him because he does feel bad about how he treated him back in the day, but tells him that what Hassan is doing to him is the same thing that he's claiming Dumont did to his father. The only difference, he claims, is that he is innocent. He says, if you untie me, I won't turn you in. You can just disappear. And Hassan, knowing at this point that the jig is up, tells him that he forgives him, and then he takes off. Now, this whole time, the cops have been trying to find Dumont because he's the police commissioner. They start to kind of go in a panic mode when they realize that the SIM card from his cell phone has been taken out. Although Youssef says that the police cell phones are different, and he's able to triangulate a location of where they think that Dumont is. But when they head there, all they find is the van, the driver from the van, and in that trunk is a clown doll dressed like a police officer. They were fooled. They start to question the driver, but he claimed that he was hired off of Craigslist, paid $200 just to pick up the trunk and drive around City Hall a few times and then head home. They start screaming at him, well, where did you drop the guy off that took the police commissioner? But he keeps saying, I dropped him off at City Hall. And only Yusef is understanding what this guy is saying. So finally, Yusef speaks up and says, guys, he's still at City Hall. Now, the rest of the police officers think that's absolutely crazy, but Yusef says, well, it's what Arsène Lupin would do. And sure enough, when they head to City Hall in the basement, they find the police commissioner. Now, after some quick questioning, Dumont was a man of his word. He doesn't give up Hassan. And Sophia thinks that's really, really weird. And even the lieutenant kind of agrees, but he also says, this is a police commissioner. He's not going to lie to us. He does get called over by Yusef, though, who thinks he's finally been able to put this whole thing together. Because the video that they have from the surveillance of the guy wheeling out the trunk to the van, the food delivery guy from the park, and Paul Cernine, they all look a lot alike. They also can't find any information on Paul Cernine other than that Wikipedia page. So Yusef is convinced that all of this has to do with the necklace being stolen from 25 years ago. And while Yusef was kind of cracking the case, Dumont, after a long day, just headed home. The first thing he does when he gets there is takes out all of the cameras. And Hassan is actually at home watching this, live. He then calls up Pellegrini after he takes out all the cameras and tells him that he needs to talk to him about Babacar, Hassan's father, because there's a, quote, new party involved. Pellegrini then gives him a place where they should meet up, and they hang up. Shortly after hanging up the phone, his wife walks in the door, and she's thrilled to see that he's okay. He instructs the cheap Amazon Alexa to play a song, but instead of playing the song, it replays the conversation that it overheard between Dumont and Pellegrini. And just to shut it up, Dumont starts smashing it on the ground because he's pissed off, knowing that even though he got all those cameras out, Hassan is still listening. And that is the reason right there why you don't go cheap with your Amazon Alexa. Episode 4 starts out with Pellegrini fast asleep as Hassan uses a drone to fly through his house to take pictures of compromising documents. But as he's doing so, he actually trips an alarm system, and Pellegrini's security staff runs in to alert him that there's a threat. Now, they think it's a person, but it's not. It's just a drone. And when they find it, they're able to close it in and destroy it. They hand it over to Pellegrini, telling them that they destroyed anything that was on it. But Pellegrini notices that there's a note inside of the drone, and the note says, I'll get you. Now, the next day, as Dumont is sitting in a cafe enjoying his breakfast while reading the paper, he suddenly looks up, and there's Hassan. He asks Dumont, let's talk about your friend, Pellegrini. What exactly did you want to tell him the other day? But Dumont learned his lesson. He doesn't say a word. And Hassan kind of figured this might happen, so he asks him, where's your wife? And Dumont says, at work. But he says, no, she's not there. And it puts the fear of God into Dumont. Hassan once again asks, what did you want to tell him? But instead of telling him what he wanted to tell him, Dumont asks him, if I give you a name, do you swear you'll stop? And Hassan agrees. And the name that Dumont gives him is Fabienne Béériot. She was a journalist that was really going after Pellegrini until he kind of ruined her life. So with this information, Hassan gets up, walks out of the cafe, and Dumont calls his wife, but it turns out she was at work the whole time. Hassan was just bluffing. Hassan then went home to do some research on Fabienne Béériot. And Béériot was a journalist who wrote a book on the Pellegrinis called Dirty Money, the Pellegrini Story. And it was all based in fact, but Pellegrini sued her, got her fired from her journalist job, which she was really good at, and now she just kind of lives her days as a borderline hoarder with her dog. So Hassan reads the book to get a better idea of who she is, and then he heads to find her. And one day when she comes back from shopping, there he is sitting in her house, but she's not really all that flustered that he's there. I mean, she wants to know who he is, and he tells her, I'm a fan. I came to get your book signed. She ends up playing dumb with him, though, saying Fabienne Béériot does not live there anymore, but he knows it's her. He then persists, but she continues to stick with the story that Fabienne Béériot does not exist. Hassan tells her that the book that she wrote was the truth, and she says, well, yeah, no, it was the truth, until I faced an army of lawyers. Even after he tells her that they have a common enemy in Pellegrini, she still isn't interested in helping him. It's worth mentioning that the more that Pellegrini's name gets mentioned, the more her dog starts barking, to the point where Hassan can't ignore it anymore, and she admits that she taught her dog to bark every time he hears Pellegrini's name, which, you know, is a cool trick. Hassan tries to remind her who she was as a journalist, because she was a straight bulldog. But she's still pretty leery of Hassan. I mean, he did break into her house, and she asks him, how do I know you're not working for Pellegrini right now? And that's when Hassan comes clean with his real motives, telling her about his father. Hassan pleads with her, telling her, I need you. This book is powerful, and I need the woman who wrote it. But Béériot just shakes her head and says, no, I'm sorry. Pellegrini's just too well protected. Let it go. So Hassan leaves, but she had time to think about it. And the next day, she's able to locate where Hassan lives and meets up with him. And now it's Hassan wondering how she tracked him down, but she says a good journalist never reveals her sources. He gets in the car where she tells him that after having some time to think about it, she's agreed to help Hassan. They have a conversation about trust and how they both need to trust each other, and she asks for Hassan's name, but he gives her a fake one, and she knows it's fake. So she gives him one more chance, but he gives her another fake name, which she once again knows is fake, until finally Hassan is forced to tell her that his name is Hassan Diop. And they then head off to Hassan's place, where she's really impressed with his setup. She asks him, though, for the full story about what happened with Hassan's dad, because he kind of just gave her the Cliff Notes version before, so he gives her the whole story. And he tells her that he's pretty positive that his dad was framed for insurance money, and she says that that would indeed check out. Back in '95, his company was on the verge of collapsing, and he would have used that insurance money to build back up his empire. They then get into how they're going to take Pellegrini down. And Hassan says they need something that he cannot bury. This isn't 1995 anymore. With the internet, it's a powerful tool. They need some damning, incriminating stuff. And luckily, Fabienne thinks that she has just the item. The only issue is it's at her old job, which they know her face and she's not allowed in. So the two devise a plan where he's going to go in clutching an envelope looking very skittish, with Fabienne waiting in the car but calling the front desk, posing as another journalist, and telling the front desk employee to look out for this guy because he's an informant. And sure enough, the front desk employee falls for it and sends Hassan right up, where he's able to grab the videotape. But as he's heading down, the front desk employee is talking to another front desk guard, where he tells him that the journalist that Fabienne was posing as is on vacation. So something's not right, and it forces Hassan to run out of the newspaper into Fabienne's car, where they're able to narrowly get away. When they get back to Fabienne's place, right before they pop in the videotape, she gives them a little backstory on what's on the videotape. It has to do with the terrorist attacks in Kuala Lumpur back in '96. 11 people were murdered in this attack, and 8 were French. And the middleman who sold the terrorists their weapons was Pellegrini. And on the video, that's exactly what you see. Pellegrini negotiating with these people for the weapons. And this video is damning. This is just what Hassan and Fabienne were looking for, and Hassan tells her that he's going to put it up on Twitter and it'll go viral by the next day. Now, while Hassan and Fabienne were trying to think of a way to take Pellegrini down, the police were meeting with Dumont because they want to let him know that they think everything's connected. And against the wishes of his coworkers, Youssef tells him that he's pretty sure this guy is the inspiration from Arsène Lupin. But just like Youssef's coworkers, Dumont thinks it's absurd. They let Dumont know that they're going to go through a composite sketch to try to figure out what he looks like, and then they take off. But as soon as they leave, Dumont gets a text from Pellegrini asking him when he wants to talk about Babacar Diop, but Dumont says he needs more information. He'll be in touch soon. The police then go to do that composite sketch, and they get everybody that encountered Hassan together. The issue is everybody's composite sketch looks different. The one police officer thinks it's just faulty equipment, but Youssef points out, yeah, it's crazy. It's just like the guy can change his appearance. But this is the information they have, and they bring it to Dumont, but Dumont yells at them, saying that none of these pictures look like the guy who kidnapped them. And that's when Youssef pulls out another one that he had done, because he had gone to Vincent, Hassan's accomplice from the Louvre, and Vincent was more than willing to give him a very detailed description on what Hassan looked like. And the description that he gave him looks exactly like Hassan. And even though Dumont knows it, he denies it to the police, saying that this isn't what he looked like. And it really frustrates Youssef, who yells, yeah, this is him. But Dumont changes the subject, criticizing the police and saying that he's planning on taking them off the case because it's been 3 weeks without the necklace and they don't have any information on it. But they promise that they can get the thing right, so he tells the 2 police officers that they're on the case and takes Youssef off of it. But once they leave the meeting with Dumont, Youssef tells them, guys, you just saw what happened. He knows something. And they agree that there's something fishy going on, but they can't investigate the police commissioner. The lieutenant tells him, man, just take a back seat. You're off the case. The next day, Hassan was true to his word. The video has gone viral. And Juliette finds out about it while she's in a meeting, along with her father and a couple of other people, for this charity that she's going to start up. And when she sees the video, she asks to be left alone with her father. And she shows it to him, but he just casts it off as nothing because he doesn't understand the power of social media. Juliette is very concerned, though. She knows the power of social media, and as she's just about to start a charity, she knows that any negative publicity could really do damage to it. Pellegrini swears, though, that he's not hiding anything. He wants the video to go down because he's, quote, a little paranoid that people are coming after him. Something that, quote, didn't happen. And he actually does a very rare move for him by going out and addressing the media in front of his house. And while Hassan and Ben are actually watching this live, Pellegrini stands in front of the police saying that the whole thing is a lie. But Fabienne, she's watching it in person because she has done something she hasn't done in years. She's joined her fellow press. And she is the one who actually asked him the question, do you think you have the victim's blood on your hands? And when Pellegrini notices who asked the question, he gets a little freaked out, doesn't answer it, and just goes back inside. And Fabienne is really proud of herself. She's grinning ear to ear as she's walking back to her house. The problem is she notices she's being followed. So she quickly hurries her pace up, and she's able to get home. And Hassan is actually there waiting for her to give her flowers because he's so proud of what she was able to do. And she has a rush of energy from it. She does mention, though, how she had one of Pellegrini's men following her, and Hassan gets a little concerned for her, but she says, "Don't worry. In my line of work, I know how to lose a tail." She then asks, all right, what do we do next? And Hassan's plan is to go on TV revealing who he is, or at least who he wants the public to think he is as this Twitter account that released the video. But Fabienne doesn't want him to go on this particular show that he wants to go on because she says it is trash television, but Hassan says it might be, but it gets 2 million viewers a day. That's a lot of eyeballs on this thing. So she sees the logic with it, and she wants to go with him, but he says, no, I got you into this mess. I'm not allowing you to go with me. I'm going to do this myself. It's my turn to take the risk. So they both head back to Hassan's place as he prepares his disguise. And while applying some makeup, he gives Fabienne a pen, hoping that it might inspire her to once again become a journalist. He then heads to the TV studio, where his disguise is that of a very old man. Best way I can describe it for basketball fans is Kyrie's character of Uncle Drew. The host of the show asks him, okay, can you describe what's in this video? And he tells the host that what you're going to see is Pellegrini selling the terrorists illegal firearms for the attack in Kuala Lumpur. But when they pop in the video, it's been completely doctored. It's made to look like Pellegrini actually pulled out of the deal when both Hassan and Fabienne watched the real video. He clearly did not. And it totally takes Hassan off guard. It actually leaves Fabienne cursing at the television. It's a really bad look for Hassan because there's nothing incriminating on this videotape. He's left speechless to the point where they actually have to go to commercial. And he turns to the host and says, all right, how much did he pay you? But it seems like the host legitimately has no idea what he's talking about, even though that's exactly what happened. Hubert Pellegrini is actually in the catwalk of the TV studio watching this all go down. And when Hassan leaves to get out of there, a couple of Pellegrini's goons try to stop him, but Hassan has worked on his fighting style since he was a kid, and he takes them both out without breaking a sweat. He's able to get out of the TV studio, rip his disguise off, and disappear. And when Pellegrini finds out that he was able to get away, he is pissed off. But he then gets a phone call from Juliet, who was watching it. And he tells Juliet, see, I told you, there was nothing to worry about. And that's when Juliet tells him, Dad, I think I know who's behind this. It's Hassan Diop. She tells her father how Hassan was the one who met her in the park, and she apologizes for not telling him sooner. And Pellegrini tells Juliet that Hassan has always wanted to destroy them because he's blamed them for his father's death. But Babacar Diop and those people in Kuala Lumpur aren't the only blood on Hubert Pellegrini's hands. Because Hassan, after leaving the TV studio, headed to Fabienne's place where he sees her dog outside, which is really weird. And when he goes in, Fabienne is hanging from the rafters in what's made out to look like a suicide attempt, when in reality, it was that goon from Pellegrini's that followed her. Because sadly, she didn't lose the tail. He saw where she lived. And he was able to muscle his way in where he demanded to know where Hassan Diop lived, but she told him a good journalist never reveals her sources, and that's when he killed her. And when Hassan finds her body, he's really broken up about it. He's able to compose himself, taking Fabienne's dog with him back to his place because the dog now needs a new home, but also taking the book because she took that pen that he gave her and she wrote him a really, really nice note in it. But as Hassan is trying to plan his next move, at the police station, Youssef has the composite sketch from Vincent right next to a still from the television show that night, and he is convinced that they are the same guy, that he's got him. In the Season 1 finale, we get more backstory on Hassan and Claire's relationship. Claire got to the point where she was fed up with Hassan. She was actually going to therapy because she realized that Hassan was not her soulmate. And in defense of Claire, Hassan was an asshole. He was stealing rich people's prized possessions, the kind of guy that would hop on Reddit and buy a bunch of GameStop stock just to stick it to hedge funds. But he had also had a fling with Juliet Pellegrini. She wanted to continue it, but Hassan told her, no, I can't do that to Claire, and he ended things. But right before Claire ended things with Hassan, she found out that she was pregnant, and that changed everything. Now, present-day Hassan is really beating himself up over Fabienne's death. He's not quite sure how to handle this. He doesn't want to let Pellegrini off the hook. He wants to continue going after him, and he's confiding in Ben. And Ben reminds him, dude, you have a family. And not only do you have a family, it's actually Raul's birthday today. Don't you have something planned for him? So Hassan hands over Fabienne's dog to Ben so he can watch him, and he heads off to Claire and Raul's. But as he's going there, he realizes that he's being followed. Now, he doesn't know this, but he's being followed by the same guy that killed Fabienne. So Hassan takes off, running through a parking garage and jumping on the roof and getting away. And just for good measure, he turns around, makes eye contact with the goon, and gives him a little nod to let him know, yeah, I got you on this one. He then goes to Claire and Raul's. And he's told Claire and Raul that he has something special planned for him. And the first thing he gives him is a top hat, but Raul isn't really into it. He tells Hassan, I really like the Lupin books, but this, I don't know. But Hassan reassures him that he's going to like it, just give it a chance. And then he tells him that they have to get to the train station because they have tickets. although they don't know where they're going. So the group heads off to the train station for this mysterious trip. Now, back at the police station, even though Yusef is off the case, he can't shake it. He knows that he's missing something with this case, and he works all night trying to figure out where it is and connect the dots. And in the wee hours of the morning, he gets an alert on his phone letting him know that it's the author of the Lupin books' birthday that day. And since he worked all night, he decides to call out. Now, the other two detectives on the case, we'll call them Tweedledee and Tweedledum because they don't have a freaking clue. They get to work the next day and realize that he's gone, but they don't think anything of it. They continue to try to dive into who exactly this mystery man is, having absolutely no leads whatsoever. Now, at this point, Hassan, Raoul, and Claire are on the train, and Hassan lets them know that where they're headed is to a Lupin festival because of the fact that it's the author's birthday. It's in a town not too far away, and Raoul is pumped. Claire decides to take a picture of the group, but as Raoul and Hassan are looking at it, Hassan realizes that in the background is that goon that was following him. And he realized that he has to do something. Now, the goon had called Pellegrini to let Pellegrini know that he was on the train and he had eyes on Hassan, and he's pretty sure that Hassan had no idea he was there. And Pellegrini tells him to leave Hassan's family, but make sure to get rid of Hassan for good. Unfortunately for this guy, Hassan is onto him. And he remembers that he bought Raoul a birthday cake, so he decides to light it on the train and sing happy birthday to him just to get an excuse to get the group drinks because, cake dries out your mouth. So Hassan walks to the back of the train, all the way to the back, place where they hide the big storage items. And of course, the goon follows him, but it gives Hassan the jump on the guy. And Hassan beats him up and locks him away, thinking that he's gotten rid of the issue. When he returns, though, Claire's a little pissed off because not only did he take forever, but he returned without drinks. And Hassan tells them that he got into a fight. It was just a skirmish, nothing major, but it had to do with a guy who brought up the best Lupin book. Hassan disagreed. The whole thing's a lie, and Claire's pretty onto it. Not too long after that, they get word that their stop is going to be next. So Hassan gets up and starts gathering his things. When he looks to his left, and here comes the goon. And he is very surprised to see him. And the goon shows him that he's holding a gun. But this time, he's not sitting back. He actually sits right next to Raoul and strikes up a conversation about Lupin. Now, Raoul doesn't know any better, but Claire knows that there's something not right with this guy. And Hassan realizes that he needs to now get rid of this guy for a third time. So he decides to text the police lieutenant's phone, saying, "Hey, this is Paul Cernine. I'm on this train. I'm about to get off at this station. This is what I'm wearing. Let's meet up for coffee and talk about this whole thing." But the genius is he describes Pellegrini's goon. And since this is a few towns over, the lieutenant can't get to him. So he has to call into that precinct and have cops waiting for him. And they have no idea what Paul Cernine looks like. So when the train arrives at the station, Hassan tells Claire and Raoul to go ahead, he'll catch up, with Pellegrini's guy holding him at gunpoint saying, "We're going to walk off the train, don't make any false moves." But when they do that, there's about 5 or 6 police officers waiting for him. Although they're not waiting for Hassan, they're waiting for Pellegrini's guy because that's the description they got. And it allows Hassan to walk away. And when they search Pellegrini's guy, not only do they find the gun, they also find a hidden gem from the necklace after Hassan had planted it there. So Hassan thinks he's finally rid of that headache, and Hassan, Claire, and Raoul go to the festival. But as they're walking over to it, with Raoul walking up ahead, Claire pulls Hassan aside and says, "All right, what was that whole deal with the train? I have to know." And it takes some prodding, but finally Hassan admits that it has to do with his father. And this is catching Claire off guard because Hassan never talks about his father with her. It's one of those few kept secrets that he just never discussed. He promises Claire that once this whole mess is done, he can tell her all the details, but she's heard that lie before. And as Hassan is pleading for forgiveness and for one more chance, they realize that they've lost Raoul. He's nowhere to be found. And that's because Raoul was kidnapped. The police in the precinct had to let Pellegrini's guy go because he didn't fit the description. So as the police back in France, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, are headed there to question him, Dumont tells them, "It wasn't your guy." Not only did he not fit the description, he didn't even look like Hassan, which, by the way, Tweedledee and Tweedledum knew that, but he had an alibi for the night of the Louvre heist, and he had a permit for that gun. They had no choice but to let the guy go. And Dumont is pissed off at them for wasting more of his time. Of course, Hassan has no idea that this guy is out in the public, and this guy has kidnapped Raoul, forced him at gunpoint into his car, and driven off. And Hassan and Claire are frantically walking up and down the festival looking for Raoul, when all of a sudden, somebody from behind Hassan says, "Lupin." And when Hassan turns around, it's Yusef, staring at him in the face. And that is how part 1 of Lupin ends. I apologize for the first part of this, saying Lupin. My bad, I didn't take French, I took Spanish. But hey, I adjusted. Consider subscribing to the channel, like the video if you liked it, hit thumbs down if you don't. Be nice in the comment section. You don't have to point out every single little mistake I made. Mistakes happen. We're human. Also, sharing is caring. There's a share button for a reason. Put it on your social media platforms. But just know I really do appreciate you guys watching this recap.